ARY Rosebaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about M&A and 401k. They should go together if there are multiple 401k plans involved in M&A, but for some reason or another, it's always a neglected part of mergers and acquisitions. So we're going to talk about some of the pothole issues and whatnot. And before that, go to that401ksite.com. September 5th, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that 401k conference. Go to that401ksite.com, sign up. Probably within a week or two, we'll have the date up for the National Virtual Conference. Studied the NHL schedule, and we cannot make a Vegas date for 2026. Vegas and the Rangers play in November, so that's not going to happen. Hopefully, we can get that in 2027. The Major League schedule will come up within a couple weeks, and we'll probably have a couple of dates for 2026. And of course, Full Circle is still available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon.com. So let's get to the topic at hand. There's a lot of attention in mergers and acquisitions dealing with financial statements, contracts, intellectual property, real estate, executive comp, and a whole bunch of lawyers and accountants, pour over every line item. I worked for two TPAs that got bought out, which I, of course, wasn't happy about, but, there was a lot of due diligence and whatnot. But too often, the 401k plan is a neglected part of any type of discussion for mergers and acquisitions. It often gets left behind. It's treated as an afterthought, and until the IRS or DOL come knocking, it's really neglected. And there's just been too many times where you work with companies and they got a retirement plan compliance disaster that they took over, or there's coverage issues and whatever. The problem, really is no one pays attention to the 401k plan. Nobody accounts for it. So that's why a lot of times in mergers and acquisitions, you see a asset sale. So if somebody buys the assets of a company, they don't want to have anything to do with the 401k plan. In the old days, really, was we don't want anything to do with the defined benefit plan, so there'd just be an asset purchase, and you don't deal with the liability that comes with a stock purchase. But the story really is the same. It's always a neglected part of, the 401k, just never discussed. And when the dust settles, the problem is that somebody came in and bought a plan and, bought a company and a plan came with it, and there's a problems. The step number one is, if you're a corporate executive dealing with an acquisition, or you're a lawyer, too often nobody wants to look at the 401k plans, look at vesting schedules, employer contributions, coverage, and all that kind of stuff that might be an issue with an asset or the stock purchase. It's not just about paperwork and whatnot. Fiduciary liability obviously comes into play, participant rights, the anti-cutback rule, all that kind of stuff. And a 401k plan is a living, breathing legal entity. It's not just an afterthought. To many it is, because they don't understand ERISA, but of course, that's why you hire experts like me. If the acquiring company isn't careful enough, there could be a landmine of, unintended fiduciary responsibilities and, compliance problems and a whole host of stuff. And there are really three kind of paths to take when, there's an M&A transaction involving two 401k plans. Number one, they can maintain separate plans. It's, done in the short term to avoid, complications, but, there are administrative headaches when you got to, put the plans together and test it together at some point. The longer you have a dual plan, structure in existence, there may be errors, misapplied contributions, and testing issues, especially if the benefits don't line up. Number two, there can always be a merging the plans. It sounds efficient, but there's got to be a thorough review of both plans to make sure you don't run into a cutback situation, and not that 411D6 issue. And in most instances, you would have to harmonize the plan provisions. Which plan is going to survive, which plan allows for loans, the vesting schedule, hardship. You got to take all the provisions and see what the surviving plan will have. And, it's a big headache. But, and sometimes, that could be the easier solution. That's why you have ERISA counsel look at the plans and come up with what, skinny on what provisions we need to have and what provisions can we have. Of course, with a stock purchase, you can decide to terminate one plan. Administratively that could be clean, but of course, you want to avoid the situation that you may trigger the successor plan rules. And, that's why I think terminating is probably the least option that I like. It's the biggest headache out there when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. And again, like the asset sale is the easiest partake. You cherry pick the assets you're going to buy. You're not going to deal with the liability of the 401k plan. It's a clean process. And the problem with mergers and acquisitions of 401k plans, there could be a compliance minefield. Too often, plans. Companies think that they could transfer a 401k plan like it's a bank account, like they're switching bank accounts, going from one bank to another. It's more than that. It's obviously a trust with a lot of tax qualification requirements. There could be an ADP, ACP issue that you don't know. There may have to be corrective contributions, corrective distributions. One of the plans might have a late 5500, top heavy, and you can have, you inherit a problem taking over somebody else's 401k. That was someone else's problem. Now, voila, here's a gift. It's your problem. Same goes with protected benefits. You might have to offer a plan with an early retirement option, which I don't like in a 401k plan. Distribution rights, whatever. It really could be an entirely hot mess. And if you're going to go through the whole M&A business during due diligence, it's important that the acquiring company should obtain a full document package for the target's 401k plan and have a thorough view. Make sure you have the entire document file, which is, every plan document and amendment since the beginning of time. The IRS rule, if you can't locate an amendment or a document, the IRS exposition never happened. Dog ate your 401k plan, dog ate your, GUST restatement. IRS is going to assume that you don't have it because you didn't do it. So it's also important to have all the documents to have a review. Now, I talk about in all the books about that year at a certain union law firm where, I was working till 2 in the morning because the attorney that I was working for, just couldn't get to me until 2 in the morning. Needless to say, when it came time to be head of EBSA, she wasn't picked. A lesser experienced partner by the name of Lisa Gomez got the job. But it's important. So when I was at that firm, I was tracing a union plan from the 1976, initial ERISA document. And, there was something along the way that got missed in the translation. And there were, features that we actually was never brought over from one of the restatements. It was a merger, I think, in the early 80s. So it's important to have all the plan documents, every amendment, every SPD, the termination letters, testing reports, evaluation reports, and all that kind of stuff. And, of course, also look at fiduciary meeting minutes. Make sure that the predecessor employer, or the acquired company had those service provider agreements. Yet, the problem is that, don't ask, don't tell. Acquiring company doesn't ask, the acquirer doesn't tell. And that could be a hornet's nest of issues. And, that's really a problem. It's the same thing when buying a house. Buyer doesn't ask, is this house in a flood zone? Doesn't do an engineer's report. That could blow up in their face when the time comes. That just happens. And the problem is who's responsible. And if you're the acquiring company, it's going to be you are. Once you acquire the company, you've become a fiduciary of that plan. And that's a problem. You owe a duty of loyalty, prudence, and care under ERISA. And if something goes horribly wrong, if fees are too high, the investments underperform, or benefits are mismanaged, you could be on the hook for mistakes that other people did. That's the whole nature of it. And again, the successor plan rule may say that I can't terminate that plan. Courts really have shown little patience for plan sponsors who plead ignorance, and the responsibility, extends to you. Whatever you're doing, your employees need to know what's happening, and it means to their retirement. So you also have to comply with any ERISA notice requirements. Vague memos and confusing enrollment windows create a trust gap, one that could certainly lead to complaints, low participation, or a whole lot worse. The real cost of getting it wrong. I've had clients pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in voluntary compliance correction programs because they failed to address 401k issues pre-closing. Others face participant lawsuits or even DOL investigation for plan errors that could have been prevented with basic due diligence and competent legal guidance. Worst of all, I've seen companies damage their reputation by mishandling the retirement benefits of their employees. That's not good. And if you bungle a planned merger, it has a clear message to employees. They don't value your future. And, it's certainly a morale killer. I was accused once of being a morale killer. I worked at a TPA place, and I simply said, when companies get bought, which we were, change happens. And Norma, who was the conversion specialist and complete backstabber, went right to the boss, and I was told I was killing morale. I'm like, I'm just telling you what reality is. Anytime there's a purchase of anything, there's a change. Change happens. Didn't say it was bad change. Ordinarily it is, but I didn't say that. But whatever. In terms of changes and all that, I got a checklist. If you're thinking about purchasing, a company or merger and all that kind of stuff, I think it's important to start the 401k review early during the initial due diligence. I think it's important to obtain full plan documentation. Don't just rely on summaries from the HR department. I know some HR people that couldn't spell 401k if you spotted them before the O of the 1K. I think it's important to review the plan operations for compliance history, errors, or red flags. It's important to, what I do in reviews, compare the key plan provisions, eligibility, vesting, match, loans, etc. See what matches up. See what protected benefits that each plan has. And if you're going to merge them, come to something that's not going to violate 411D6. I think it's important to engage experienced ERISA counsel and TPAs, not just M&A lawyers who couldn't spell ERISA. These are often the people that bungle the job and don't, look at the plans. And they're the ones who help you gain some liability as a fiduciary for a plan you just bought. I think it's important to decide early. You're going to maintain, merge, or terminate, then build a timeline. Most of the time, termination is not going to work if in a merger and acquisition if you're keeping on employees. But, you know, you always have to be aware of the successor playing a role. Communication is key. It has to be clear and often with your infected employees. If there's a blackout period, whatever is the plan, let them know. It's important to let them know. If they don't have access to the account, blackout notice applies and whatnot. Do that as well. Mergers and acquisitions are, really about the future. But ignoring the 401k plan is a surefire way to drag the worst parts of the past into the next chapter. You don't want to deal with the mistakes of the past, especially if you had nothing to do with those mistakes. Inheriting mistakes can be costly. These 401k plans matter. It's not just for regulatory, burdens. They're, real money, trust, and features for employees. Plan sponsors always forget that. It's a benefit for your employees. And if you don't care about it, it means you don't care about your employees. I made a key career out of clearing out messes others people, ignored. Believe me when I say this, it's far better and far cheaper to get it right the very first time. If you're not sure where to begin, I think it's important by asking the question that most people forget. What's going on with the 401k plan? If no one knows, that's a problem. If you're purchasing a plan and the HR or benefits specialist doesn't know, that's a problem. If no one's asking, you already have your first fiduciary failure. So, I think it's really important to get it right. And of course, in the M&A space, that often doesn't happen. So that's that for this episode of That 401k Podcast. Go to that401ksite.com. Further information about Milwaukee, a couple weeks, we'll have the National Virtual Conference. It'll be sometime in January, it looks like it. And then pick up a copy of Full Circle, available on Amazon.com and Kindle paperback. I am working on a fourth book. I think it's tentatively called That 401k Plan Provider Marketing Book. Hope to have it out in January. So I think it was like 8 years between the last book and Full Circle, and it will be 6 months between Full Circle and this Plan Provider Marketing Handbook. I think when it comes to my personal life, I think I've said what I've needed to say, and I think it's time to concentrate on a book for the 401k industry that they might actually buy and read and learn, I guess. So we'll have that out. We'll have an announcement probably sometime. It's going to be before the conference. People could buy the book before the National Virtual Conference. Plan providers want to work a deal with me and hand these copies out. We could probably find a cheap version of it. But I'm very, very excited about that. I think we're probably halfway through that book. Just what I think of marketing and content and just the networking do's and don'ts, stuff that I've written in previous books, but all new stuff, all concentrated, just simply on 401k plan provider marketing. So that's the announcement for this week. And I hope you tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of That 401k Podcast. Take care.